And it is Australia that is going through into the semi-finals. We're here outside of the Eden Gardens. We have witnessed this magnificent match. Of course, it was full of twists and turns. At no point did we know who was going to win until the very end, when Australia clearly had the upper hand. But let's talk about the match, Ishan. Beginning with the very first innings, the way that South Africa crumbled, did you think that South Africa could, sort of make a comeback after that?
I have to say I was a little surprised, because after winning the toss and opting to bat, I thought they'll go out there and post a reasonably good total. 210 odd is not enough in a semi-final. The opener struggled, they got out very early. I think Australia, got the benefit by getting those early breakthroughs and restricting them from scoring a lot of runs. A lot was expected out of the captain, who got out very, very, very early in the game, and even Quinton de Kock couldn't perform. David Miller was a star performer, so I think we should talk about him after this. But besides that, I think the rest of the batting lineup just crumbled in a big match when they were supposed to step up.
Absolutely. When we look back onto the very first innings, when South Africa, winning that toss was very important. And of course, putting yourself into bat, you should know that you need to, soak in that pressure and put up a good was the total that was posted by South Africa, which was clearly not enough, because you're up against a team like Australia, which has proved as a batting prowess. But when we look at their innings, South Africa's innings, I mean, no one but David Miller stood up to the challenge. If it wasn't for David Miller, you wouldn't have gotten to that total anyway.
And that's why they call him Killer Miller.
Absolutely.
Because he's absolutely lethal, and he's someone who can talk the ball a long way. So I think all the South African fans are really counting on David Miller, and thanks to Miller, they got to a reasonably fine total. But if it wasn't for Miller, I think they would have really struggled to even put up 200 on the board.
Absolutely. But David Miller, of course, will get all the credit for the way that he batted, that incredible 100. But after that, South Africa coming in, kind of trying to defend that total. Shamsi, what an bowling performance from him, because at no point did you think, because Travis Head was going strong, David Warner at one point was going strong, but after that, you thought maybe Australia has it in their hands, and this is a clear win, this is going to be a dominant performance from Australia, but that didn't happen, because Shamsi completely turned the match around at one point. Talk about Shamsi.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you, Gargi, because at first both the openers seemed to be just taking the game away from South Africa, and they got off to such a flying start. David Warner hit those boundaries early on. Travis Head was looking really good, but then Shamsi came out of nowhere and started getting those wickets. So those wickets suddenly gave a little bit of hope for the Proteas, which really helped them out. However, 210, 15ish wasn't enough for South Africa.
Again, Ishan, talking about that fight back from South Africa, because we were talking about Tabraiz Shamsi. Those were some incredible wickets from him and incredible line that he was bowling. Getting Australia out at that point, getting some of those batters out was very, very important for South Africa, because when you look at it, Australia could have won this very, very easily in, 20, 30 overs, but then South Africa really put up a fight.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to Shamsi. I mean, Australia was really getting away with the game, and Shamsi came in with a lot of belief, got those 2 wickets, and you could suddenly see that the tide was changing towards South Africa. But again, I don't think the total was enough. Having said that, Gerald Coetzee bowled really well. He was, steaming up some good pace. We saw it from the stands. We could see the ball travelling far enough to the keeper, and you could see that he's really putting in effort. So overall, I think the South African bowlers should be really proud, but I think the batsmen let them down today, Gagi.
Absolutely, I believe so too. But since we're talking about South African bowling, we also have to talk about Marco Jansen, because his line in the power play was really, really off, and that gave away a lot of runs, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, true. I mean, early on, if you have a small total on the board, the first priority has to be restricting yourself as much as possible. So Marco Jansen was all over the place, and I think David Warner, Travis Head just took advantage of that. It's a big match, and you can't afford to bowl too many wide, you can't afford to bowl too many loose ones, and unfortunately he did just that. So if you're going to do that in a big game like a semi-final, it's bound to cost you.
Absolutely, but Travis Head really stood strong over there, because 2 early wickets, right? David Warner was, he had his momentum going, but then losing that wicket was very, very difficult. And also Glenn Maxwell at that point, you thought, because there were so many early wickets, you thought that Glenn Maxwell, because of the way that he performed in the last match, he could be, the turning point in the match. He could be the one that would get you those quick runs, and kind of win the match early, but then that wicket, Glenn Maxwell's, Shamsi strikes again. But talk about Travis Head a little bit.
Yeah, Travis Head, seemed really good in the beginning, and he's been doing that in the last few matches for Australia. He's been giving the starts that the team needs. He's basically doing the job of Rohit Sharma in the Indian side. So Travis Head, again, fantastic player, giving the start that the team needs, and he might be a complete menace going into the final.
So that is it. Australia is through to the finals,
Yes.
and they will contest against India. The much awaited final for India, because after such a long drought of ICC trophy in India, India is going into the finals after a long time, and they are going to be up against the mighty Australia. Tonight, it seemed like at one point they would be losing the match, but then they made a comeback, they held their ground and kind of came back into the match. Ishan, your thoughts about, an India versus Australia final?
I mean, Gagi, it's going to be such a big game at Ahmedabad. Two big teams, and the Australian team's also performing really well. They've come back into form. Obviously, they didn't perform to their best in the game today, but the last few games, fantastic performances. Glenn Maxwell, Travis Head coming good, David Warner coming good. The fast bowlers are looking really good, and the same with the Indian team. The batsmen are looking good as well as our bowlers. So it's very interesting because both these teams, all of our players are performing. All of the Aussie players are performing. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Absolutely, and India versus Australia is always very, very interesting, isn't it? Because the intensity is so high in both these teams. India and Australia have a lot of history behind them. A lot of that intensity comes from the Border Gavaskar Trophy, because that's where they really go head on and against each other, and all that aggression from both the teams. They are, one of the best rivals when it comes to the World Cup. But when we look at this match, now that India is over there, 10 on 10, unbeaten. Even Australia had some losses, but then India's going into this match, into the final, unbeaten. Your thoughts, Ishan?
I think India's got more momentum with them because, they've just been so consistent. Australia, on the other hand, have had their ups and downs. So my final words would possibly be that the Indian side would have an upper advantage going into the game, just because of the sheer performances and Virat Kohli again being the spectacular performer that he is. Mohammad Shami getting a seven wicket haul is no easy feat, Gagi. So I'm excited to see Mohammad Shami perform as well, and I think you are as well, right? At Ahmedabad with 1 lakh people supporting him.
Of course, it's going to be a crazy crowd, and it's one of the biggest strengths of playing in India, isn't it, for the Indian team? Because look at the crowds in all the matches. They've been crazy, and Virat Kohli hyping them up, always egging them on, giving them antics on the ground, dancing to the songs. Even David Warner today was very interactive with the crowd, dancing on those Pushpa songs, if I'm not wrong. And the crowd is incredible in India, because even if it was an Australia versus South Africa semi-final, the crowds were packed. Only a little seats were left empty, but then the crowd has been cheering on for both the teams. And although it looked like South Africa was the favourite among the crowds because the cheers were the loudest for South Africa, but then it is Australia going into the finals. It's going to be India versus Australia in the World Cup final this time. Stay tuned to Rev Sports. We will be back.